All right, we're back. We are COMP305 in the fall 2017 semester at Centennial, and we are week 6, part 2 of our broadcast. We just finished talking about some simple animations, and then we're going to go into talking about bullets. Just to finish up with the animations piece, again, yeah, I was looking at a texture packer. There is nothing else to do. What it does is actually breaks down the atlas into several different sprites that you can use, and that's what we did already. Okay, so there's going to be more on animation. I'm not going to do that today because we don't really have a really good case for it, animation yet. I will, perhaps if we get to it today, I'd like to bring in an explosion animation, right? Talk about that, how to do an explosion. But the first thing is we need to kind of create some bullets and maybe another enemy. Okay, so right now we only have our player, and we want to have some additional challenge, let's say, for making another level. Right? So we're going to do some asset creation as well. So how do we do that? How do we create bullets? Well, there's a couple ways to do this here. First, we need an asset. We can make a bullet ourselves, right? We could do that. And I have some assets that I could use as well that have been previously used with this game. Let's see if I can find them. So I'm going to go into my folders for COMP305, the many folders that I have. Eventually, I will organize myself a little bit more. Let me see if I can get my project assets. Maybe there's going to be more in here. Nope. There was another set of assets that I used for the original ones, and I may have them in another folder. Just give me 1 second while I find it, and then we're good to go. Because the original assets came from, like I said, Andy Harris. He's the one that kind of made them. And then they were imported into Game Maker and a bunch of other places. But originally, the ones I first saw were with Andy Harris, and he's the one that kind of used them originally. And then so I had them way back. So I want to make sure I have the assets here. And this is back when I was programming in, maybe it's week 7. Back when I was programming with Python back in the day, right? So I have this 1945 bitmap that I like to bring in for you guys to show you. This is the original assets that we're going to do. So we're going to do some asset creation today. So 1945, I'm going to copy this thing. I'm going to put this thing in my assets, and then I'll drag and drop it into your folder on Slack. Okay, so I'm going to go back to courses, go back to actually my desktop, going to back to where I was in my folders. Let's get rid of that. Folders under Unity projects. Here's my MailPilot demo. I'm going to go into my assets. It's not really a sprite, but I'll put it in there, right? I'll kind of copy it in. There it is, 1945. And I'm going to open it up so you can see what it looks like. It looks like this. Right, so these are all the assets from that original game back in the day. Again. So this is the assets that we got with the original one. And I want to make a couple things here. I want to make an explosion so that you can see that there's an explosion graphic here. Right? A few frames. And there's also a different kind of plane. Here's another kind of enemy plane you can see, or this could be our plane. And there's also some other kinds of planes you can pick up, as well as some enemy boats that you want to destroy. Sometimes you can see that the boats will come up like a submarine, that kind of thing. And some other enemy planes up here as well, some different kinds of enemy planes up in the corner here. So before I go into the details of that, I want to drag and drop this thing into Slack. So let's bring up our Slack channel. And I'll give you that asset so we can play with it together. I do encourage you guys to do this with me so that we can both learn together how this all works. One day when Slack decides to connect, since I'm doing all kinds of lovely stuff. I'm going to go into general here, and I'm going to go and drag and drop. Looks like all kinds of little information, but anyways, definitely maybe things that shouldn't be on our general channel, but that's fine. So I'm going to go into 1945 here and drag and drop it. So this is the graphic that I want you guys to take a look at. So go into that Slack channel you have access to, and you can grab that graphic. I'm going to put it up on GitHub in a second too. But so I've got this graphic, and I want to modify it. I want to grab some stuff out of it. And remember, we have our sprite sheet, right? So I'm going to open it up with my programmer's choice instead of using, you know, my images. One day, I will be able to open it with my fireworks. There we are. And I'm going to zoom in here so you can see the graphics. They're pretty simple, right? They're pretty simple. These are graphics from the original game, 1945. And you can see that there's an enemy ship. Here's an enemy player. And they have different kinds of states for the enemy, right? So there's a plane that goes this way. There's a plane that goes this way, to the right and left. The planes that go all over the place. So just, I'm going to pick one of these planes that we're gonna use as our enemy sprite, right? And I'm not going to use every one of these, right? Because it doesn't make any sense. But we're going to need to do some work in order for me to use some of this stuff. Now, what could you say is the problem, first of all? Can anyone see a problem with the way this sprite sheet's laid out? Imagine if you grabbed this from the web, right? What would you do? I want to make a sprite sheet. I want to use my plane right now. And I know that my game is set up so that things come down from the top of my screen, okay? So you can see that I really can't use this one right now because I don't have any kind of motion for my plane to go down, come across, and come up. So I can kind of make it almost like a turn. I can make my plane turn around this way, right? But take a look at the propeller, right? The propeller looks like it's to the right all the time. So it looks like the propeller's not moving in all these cases. Maybe here it is, right? Or it's on the left, right? And this one's from on the right. But we have some cases where we have to make some changes to some of these things. So we have to modify or create some assets on our own. Sometimes we need to do this, right? We can also look at other instances of these planes, maybe find one that's better. Here's the explosion we're going to use. I'm going to use this explosion here. And by God, here's the bullet that I'm going to use too. Hey, look, this is our plane. This is our plane, right? And you can see that this is the different states, but these are the bullet that I want. So you can see that there's different kinds of bullets. These can also be explosions, right? And there's different bombs, right? These are the different bullets I can use if I want, right? Lots of different things that I can use. Different kinds of planes if I want to swap my plane out and make a different color plane, right? Or I can use helper planes that kind of come on the side of my plane and so on. Lots of little things I can do with my game, right? Definitely want to use the explosion. I want to try and set that up today if we can. But these are the kind of bullets I can use. And there's small bullets and there's bigger bullets. Okay. So what do? Let's do the bullet first because that's the easiest one. So I want to grab this. I'm in Fireworks, but you can do it with any manipulation program that you like. And I'm going to grab my little crop tool. Crop an area that seems to be the area that's just for the bullet itself. This big bullet right here. Now, this is quite a big area for me, right? And I got this blue background, and the blue background has to go. Because if I grab this thing, the blue background is going to show up too. I got to make it transparent background, right? So first of all, I'm going to crop this thing here and then zoom in. I cropped it badly, but that's okay. So I'm going to continue to crop. So I want to kind of crop this thing as close as I can, the bullet. This is my bullet that I'm going to use. So I'm actually going to use a graphic for the bullet, not make one, by hand. And I can move in there as much as I want to really do a good crop. What I mean to do is like one of those. Okay, so there's my bullet now. Okay, there's my bullet. You can see they're just pixels, right? Any pixel editor will do this properly. Okay, but what I want to do now is I want to go into my eraser tool, right? And I want to be able to erase these parts in here. So kind of erase areas that are here. So here's my eraser tool. Now again, this is pretty big. If I do this, it'll erase the whole thing. So I don't want it that big. And I got to reduce the size of my eraser tool to like 1 pixel. Now it's like a dot. I want to kind of erase just the pixels that I don't want on my screen so that you can see this little checkered pattern comes in the back. This is a PNG file, right? And that's my bullet, right? Nice and easy. So I've taken away all the information that I don't care about. All I care about is the bullet information right there, right? And I'm going to use this thing as my bullet. Looks kind of round, right? But really it's not. You can see that it's not quite round. It's kind of more hexagonal than anything else. But for us, it's going to be enough. I'm going to save this, save as, and I'm going to go back into my sprite sheet. Make sure that it's in my assets, that's in my COMP305 demo, in my assets, in my sprites. Let's go back to my sprites. Here it is. And instead of calling it 1945 bitmap, I'm going to call this my bullet, right? .ping. Actually, I'll just make it, I'll call bullet, and I'll make sure that Fireworks renames it as a ping file. There it is, right? I don't want to add the .fw.ping in the end. That's to say that it's a Fireworks ping. By the way, there's other programs that'll do the same thing. Photoshop will do the same thing. Illustrator can do the same thing. GIMP can do the same thing. Krita can do the same thing. A bunch of other programs out there. .NET, Paint.NET can do the same thing. I'm just using this program because I'm comfortable with it. All right. And I'm going to click save. So there, my bullet is now saved as its own. But we talked about sprite sheets. So I want to update my sprite sheet with Texture Packer, right? So how do I do that? Here's my Texture Packer, right? Even though I saved my sprite sheet, my bullet separately just to have the asset, I'm going to go into Finder, and I'm going to grab that bullet that I just made. I'm going to kind of drag and drop it onto my Texture Packer, and it adds it into the top corner. See, way up there. And we're going to continue to update my sprite sheet, right? Okay, good. Now I'm going to publish my sprite sheet back into my assets. I'm going to publish. It's going to publish my sprite sheet. Done. And when I go back to Unity, right, I have my bullet, and I have my new MailPilot atlas automatically, right, and it has my bullet in there. One thing I want to do is make sure that my pixels per unit are 1-to-1 on my sprite sheet. We need to use that 1-to-1. And also that my I don't use any compression. I don't want that. Okay. We've made a little animation, which we have to remake in a second because I have my little plane animation, but I made it with these planes and not these planes, right? So if I go back to my little animations, here it is, my idle animation. That's what I called it. I'm just going to get rid of it. So I'm going to get rid of this animation, my idle animation. Okay, and then I'm going to go and do that same thing. So I'm going to take my sprite sheets. I'm going to take my little plane 1, 2, 3, like this, plane 1, 2, 3, and just drag it back in here from my sprite sheet. And it's going to ask me, hey, where do I want to make my animation? I want to choose my animations area here. I'm going to call this thing my plane animation. Right, plane animation. All it is right now. I called it idle before, but I'll put that back in there. And this is, I don't need this plane anymore. I just wanted to, that's the way we create our sprites really quickly, right? I already have this stuff. My animator is right here. All the same stuff is there, right? But I want to change my animator now because I messed with it. I'm going to go back to my animations. I have my plane 1 animator. I'm going to get rid of that. I don't need that. But I have my plane animation. This is my plane animation. So if I bring up my animator, I kill my idle animation. And I'm drag in my plane animator in here, my plane animations. And so this is the default animation that's going to play. So that's number 1. And I want to test it to see if this is true. So I'm going to kind of test it, and hopefully we'll see that my plane animation is working. That's great. So my plane animation still works. Fantastic. All right, now in my sprites, in my sprite sheet, so I have my extra information here. I'm not going to use them, and I know that I want to keep kind of a sense of all my sprites, but I want to put it inside an area there where I'm not going to always need to look at them. I just need them just as backup, just in case I want to recreate my sprite sheet. I want to have access to my sprites, right? So it's like my sprite sheet is the main one, and my sprites should be a separate one. So I'm going to keep my sprites in a separate folder, and I'm going to make another folder in my assets called sprite sheet. So I'm going to make another folder called sprite sheet. This is my sprite sheet, and I'm going to go into my sprites, right? And I'm going to grab this mail pilot, both the atlas and these two files here, just these two files, and I'm going to drag and drop them inside my sprite sheet. Okay. Now it doesn't mess anything up. It just, because Unity is really good with that, it just knows where everything is. And if I get to test that out, you can see that's still going to have my little animation. Okay, so that's all good to go. I just wanted to separate. So I'm only going to look at my sprite sheet data now. I'm not going to look at the other information, right? And I have my bullet in my atlas. I also have a bullet now. Here's my bullet, right? The one I made. Okay. For those people who don't have access to an editor, I'm just going to grab my bullet ping and pull it into my Slack. Okay, so you guys can have the kind of the decoded bullet, so I call it, right? So I'm back into Slack. So I grab my bullet and pull it into Slack. So you have the same bullet I do. Bullet. You can draw a bullet. There's different things to do, but I figured I'd just do it for you so that it's done. Okay, so you and I have all the same stuff. Great, fantastic, right? I have my bullet. I want to make my bullet fire. Well, first of all, I need the bullet as an object, right? So this is the programming part of the bullet firing stuff. Okay, so I'm going to go back over here, and I'm going to go into my atlas. Here's my atlas. And I'm going to pull the bullet inside of my hierarchy like this, just like I did before, which creates a sprite renderer. That's what it does. Here's my sprite renderer, okay? And a bullet asset. Let's make this new bullet. I'm going to call it capital B bullet. Right? I'm also going to tag it. So I'm going to make a new tag. Remember we did this last time. I'll make a new tag in here. I'm going to call it bullet. There it is. And when I go back to my bullet, I want to tag this thing as a bullet. There we go. So now it's a bullet. Wonderful. This is part one. We also need some kind of collider on the bullet. So when it hits something, right, you can detect that it's hitting. Okay. So I'm going to go back into into my bullet, click on add component, right? I'm just going to kill this part. And I'm going to go into physics 2D, and I want a collider. Now, I think bullet's pretty circular, so I'm going to use a circle collider. Okay. Whoa. Okay. Don't know what that bullet looks like, and I can't even see the bullet on the screen. And in fact, when I look at the transform component, it's 0, 0, 0. My order and layer is 0. That's wrong. I want to bring the bullet so it's the same order and layer as the plane, which is probably around 2, if I'm not wrong. There's my bullet. I don't want it to be under the plane necessarily. You know, I want it to be over the plane. But just to check, island is 1. Ocean is 0. Cloud, if I look at my prefabs, my cloud, right, I'll bring this down a little bit, is 3. Cloud is 3. Player is 2. Okay? So I want it to go under the clouds. I don't want them to go over the clouds from an order and layer perspective. Bullets always have to go under the clouds, right? And because they're going to fire at things, you know, at the same level as the plane, right? If I wanted to fly my plane over the clouds, that'd be okay. But the problem is I have this really pesky shadow here, right? Which is generated because the plane itself has a shadow attached to it, right? Later on, we'll take the shadow away, maybe, if we have time, and add its own real-time shadow, a blob. Looks like the plane, okay? So kind of a real-time generated shadow as opposed to a shadow that's part of the plane. But for now, we have this bullet. Let's go back to the bullet. And if I frame select by moving my mouse over here and pressing frame select on the bullet, so frame select on the bullet, that's what the bullet looks like. And you can see that when I created my circle collider, if I click edit collider, you can see that the collider is pretty tight. I think Unity did a really good job on kind of encircling this thing. I have a bit of information outside of it, but it's going to be so close that I don't have to do anything. I'm not going to modify anything here because I think it's just pretty good. So I got my circle collider. So my circle collider is there. Remember, I need the collider in order for me to know that something's hit something else. Okay. And right now there's nothing to hit because my bullets have no enemies, right? But one thing at a time. Okay. So I want to make my bullets fire out, right? And they're going to fire in a particular direction all the time. Every bullet is going to have its own direction and speed. And it's going to go negative of the, kind of in a direction, from the plane, right? It's going to go up the screen. Okay, number one. So I need a script for this bullet. Again, I'm just bringing it into play right now so I can modify it. And then I'll make a prefab of it in a bit. So I'm going to go back into my scripts. I'm going to add a new script, a new C# script. I'm going to call it bullet controller. I have lots of little scripts here, right? And I'm using them just to control little things. So you could certainly combine some of these things. I'm not going to. I'm going to make it separate. I'm going to double click, and my mono develop is finally working again. So I'm not using Visual Studio anymore. This is the one that's built into Unity. And I want my bullet controller. Here it is. Lots of little scripts. You can see it part of my project, right? I like mono develop because it's simple, not because it gives me better tooling. Actually, Visual Studio gives me better tooling, like code hinting and all that, than the mono develop. But the great thing about it is that it's very simple. If you want to code, you can actually do all this in an editor, right? So what do I want my bullet to do? I want it to, when it comes into being, when I bring it into being, whether I instantiate it or regenerate it or do whatever I'm going to do with it, right? I want this thing to shoot forward, right? When I bring it into being, okay? So I want it to move, which means I need some kind of speed for the bullet. And I'm going to call this, it's going to be a public property, right? Or public instance that I'm going to use to call, it's going to be an integer value. And I'm going to just call it vertical speed. Okay. I'm going to set the vertical speed value here. So I'm going to say this dot vertical speed is equal to some value. Now let's think about this. The ocean moves 5, right? That's how fast it moves down. And it's kind of slow, right? And the plane shoots around, or the clouds shoot down a maximum of 10. So that's pretty slow. We got to make this bullet fire really, really quickly. So let's set it as a default value of something like 10 for now. Let's see what that works, how that looks for us. So vertical speed of 10. And on update, what I wanted to say is I want to basically move this bullet up the screen. Okay, well, what does up the screen mean? First of all, where is this thing? Where is this bullet right now? If I click on bullet, by default, it's at the 0, 0 position, right? And if I put these little handles on it, it's going to move in this direction. Notice that it's going to climb. The number is going to go up on the Y direction only, right? All I care about is adding 10 at this value to my position vertically. So I'm going to say transform position plus equals to. Now, I also have to talk about some things that are built in, right? I have something called a vector2 object, right? Here's vector2. And vector2 has some basics built into it. For example, it has down, it has up, right, and so on. If I click up, it's shorthand for writing 0, 1. So X and Y, right? 0, 1. And what I want to do is I want to multiply this by my speed. So if my vertical speed is 10, right, then I'm going to multiply my vector, my 1 by 10. Okay, let's see if that works out. So 1, and I'm going to multiply this by my vertical speed. Right? So this, what it's doing is, instead of doing the other way, I could have done it. I could have written this differently. I could have said is equal to a new vector2 object with the original location, transform.position.x, and then transform.position.y plus the vertical speed. I could have done that, right? I could have done that. But I figured that this might be easier to look at. It's a little differently laid out. Let's see what this does for us, right? So if I save it, and I'm going to go back into the game. Here's my bullet. And just to make it more realistic, I'm going to pull the bullet. I'm going to pull the bullet down so that it is right in front of the plane. Okay, so frame select mode, you can see it's right in front of the plane now. I'm getting a bit of an error, and I can say it says that the bullet controller error, the call is ambiguous between the following methods, right? Transform that position, or properties. Unit engine 4 3 operator, unity engine dot vector 3 dot and unity engine vector 2 operator plus this. Doesn't like that. Doesn't like that I'm trying to do this because position is a vector 3 object, right? That's the transform position, and I'm using a vector 2. Maybe I need to do one of these. Go away. That's better. That's what it wants, right? Doesn't matter, vector 3. That's totally fine because position is a vector 3 and vector 3, this is a vector 3, right? Even though I don't need the Z coordinate because it's 0, right? It wants to move up. And if I run this thing, we should see some movement of the bullets, but we do not. So that was the bullet. The bullet didn't really move. Why? Because we didn't attach the script to the bullet. Let's do that now. So here's my bullet controller, here's my bullet. And just to move this on, I need to take the bullet controller script and attach it. There we go. We forgot to do that. It says vertical speed 0. I'm going to just put a 10 in there. We can modify that later. And then just run it and see what happens. So see how it moved up? Let's try that again. Right? For now, by the way, if I want my my sounds to not work or to be muted, I could mute the sounds in my player, but I figured that I'll just keep it going. I'll just make it, we'll just ignore it for now. Okay, so if I undo these, if I just go click, 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 right, as an example, then what's going to happen is it's going to have an error. It's going to cause, if I undo these and I try and run the game, right, it may not run properly. I cannot play sounds. But anyways, we'll keep it like this. We can hear me talk here, right? So let's take a look at that bullet again. Ready? 1, 2, 3, and boom, right? Now, is that fast enough? Maybe too fast, maybe not fast enough. We don't know yet, right? We don't know how fast it is compared to, imagine if I'm firing a bunch of bullets, right? This is just one bullet, right? So the bullet's going to move. What else do we need to know about the bullet? When the bullet leaves the screen, it needs to reset, right? It's almost like I want the bullet to be in some kind of location. Because remember, I want to use these bullets over and over again, right? I don't want to instantiate anything. I want to have a group of bullets that I use. Could I possibly need in the screen? Maybe 20? If I'm only having one bullet come out, okay, right? But what if I have multiple bullets spawn? Like, let's take a look at my ship for a second, right, to see this. Do you think the bullet should spawn out of the middle of my ship like this? Just saying, right? Maybe. For now, it's okay for it to spawn at the bottom, right? But I need a couple things. I need something called a spawn point for the bullet. The bullet's going to come right to the spawn point. Whenever I press the button, whatever button it's going to be on my mouse right now, right? I want my bullet to spawn exactly at this position, or maybe even, if I was to look at this, maybe even a little bit closer to my plane, like right here. So I need a spawn position right here, okay? And I want the bullet, when it's spawned, right, to appear here, run up the screen, and when it leaves the screen, I want it to disappear and go somewhere else. And it's going to just sit there in the middle of the screen somewhere, okay? Somewhere far away. Like, for example, if I look at my screen, I have all this real estate off screen, right? I want to make it so that even in the worst case scenario, you can't see it. So maybe somewhere over here, like way over here, the bullets should appear, right? Or maybe some negative amount, negative 10,000 or something like that, right? Definitely not down here, because some screens, if you look at this, maybe they can see some of this part, right, over here somehow. I don't want it to be somewhere close to the screen. Okay, somewhere way over here. So the bullet's default position can't be where it is right now. We know the motion is pretty good. So the transform for this, as a default, my Y position is wrong. It doesn't matter where the Y position is. But I want the reset the position to be something like, and I'm not joking, like negative 1,000, like way down there. And then my X position is like negative 1,000. something way over there. And if I was going to look at the bullet now, it's like, just to give you an idea of where this thing is relative to the screen, it's like way down here. Okay. I'm going to put all my bullets are going to be here, right? So when I create my game, I want all my bullets to come on board on the screen at the same time, right? Because I'm going to use a bullet pool, a pool of bullets, right? So this is one way I could do it. Okay, so I have all my bullets, and I use a bullet pool somehow, and I spawn them over here. For now, let's make it so there's no bullet pool, all right? There's no bullet pool. I want it to spawn at a certain place. I have my bullet. It's going to be a prefab. I'm going to spawn it by instantiating it, right? That's what I want to do first. That's the first step. Worst case scenario, you guys can do that. It's not going to hurt me. I'm not going to be upset about it. And then I'll show you how the bullet pool works at this position. So I'll reset everything back to normal, right? But that's what I want to do. I want to kind of move it off screen and not have a bunch of bullets off screen all at once and then fire them off. Great. So here's my bullet. I've almost got everything I need, but I do want to do something like this. I want to say when my bullet leaves the screen, it's destroyed for now. Okay? It means in my bullet controller, here's my bullet controller, I want to check to see if it's left the boundaries of my screen, right? So I'm going to say, I want to create another method called checkbounds again, right? So void, we'll say private, it's a private method. We'll call it underscore checkbounds. And I want it to, when it leaves the boundaries of my screen, when this thing leaves the boundaries of my screen, so I'm going to say if transform.position.y, right, is greater than a certain number. How do I know what my screen bounds are? Well, I know that my screen is 640 by 480, but unfortunately for me, I'm using Unity's bounding system, and that's not picture perfect. It's not pixel perfect up here. It's using a kind of a, I'm setting it up so it uses the Unity units as opposed to what I've used before, which is pixels. We're not in pixels, we're in Unity units, right? So I got to take my bullet for a second, and I want to say that it's going to be something like this when it leaves the screen, like that much. And I'm just going to focus in on that again. And so just to make it very perfect, as soon as it leaves the screen, something like this, right? And you can see that the number is 244. Let's just make it even at 245. Right, there's 245. Okay. As soon as it reaches 245 units, I mean, that's going to be off screen, right? Left the screen. Oop, I want to destroy it. So I'm going to say if the Y position is greater than 245, right? And destroy, I'm going to use this new keyword that you may have not seen before, destroy, and then I'm going to point to a game object, okay, which is going to be this game object. So it's going to be game object, the one that's tied to this particular thing. So destroy game object. And if I really want to, I can be explicit and say this .game object. It's the game object that this script is attached to. It'll destroy it. It destroys itself, basically. So that's one of the things they can do. The other thing I want to do is I want to destroy this bullet when it hits anything else, any other kind of collider, right? But not a cloud collider. I don't want it to to destroy itself when it hits a cloud, because you can't shoot clouds off out of the screen, right? Remember, we're going to make a new enemy. Only when it hits the other enemy, whatever it's going to be called, we're just going to call the other enemy, okay? For now. So I want a new on collision enter 2D event, right? So on collision enter 2D, and then it's going to be of type collision 2D, right? We're going to call the other one other, whatever the other thing we're colliding with. We're going to put a void in front of that, right? So on collision enter 2D, when this bullet collides with something else, right? Another collider, right? Another object, it's going to destroy itself as well. That's the other option. The other thing it's going to have. So it destroys itself if it leaves the boundary of the screen, and it destroys itself if it hits some other kind of, where the other dot name is equal to enemy, right? If other dot name dot game object dot name, right, is equal to enemy, right, then destroy itself too. We can modify the script later. So destroy game object. Also, by the way, when it hits the enemy, it maybe just does some damage, which we haven't done yet. We don't know, you know, what's going to happen. Also, well, just to keep this clear, on the start method, I also want to name this thing. So I'm going to say this dot name, sorry, this dot game object dot name is equal to bullet. Just so that way we can, whenever it's instantiated, we make a new name for it. We call it a bullet. So, you know, we can kind of use that as for messaging purposes. All right, so this is some setup we've done. We're going to come back to this and fix this later. But for now, this might be good enough for us. All right, let's go back to Unity and check to see if this works. So I'm going to go back and reset this thing for now. Here's my reset position. Uh-oh, it gives me an error. It's saying that other.gameObject.name is equal to enemy. We need to put double equals. That would be good, Tom. Thank God that Unity gives me some of the stuff we would have problems with. And let's see if it works. So it leaves the screen, and then the bullet should be destroyed. Where is the bullet? It's Y keeps growing, but the bullet didn't get destroyed, right? Why not? Let's see what happens. Let's see why this script didn't take effect. So save the script, and let's see what we're never checking it. We're never calling it. So we want to move this thing, and then I want to say check bounce, this dot underscore check bounce. Because if we don't call this method, then it'll never fire. Okay, so let's do this. Try again. You can see we have the bullet in play at the beginning, and then leaves the screen and it's gone. Okay, so we've destroyed itself. The bullet has destroyed itself. Great. We're ready to make this bullet into a prefab. So I'm going to go into my prefabs folder right here and drag and drop my bullet into my prefabs folder. There it is. And now we can delete the bullet. Oh, wonderful. I need something else for my player now. My player, nice that it is, right, needs to have a spawn point. The spawn point where the bullet's going to materialize. As soon as the bullet materializes, it's instantiated in the spawn point, it's going to fire forward, right? So I need an empty game object, and it's going to have to be tied to my player. Okay, so for now, let's click on my player, a -200, and I'm going to make a new empty game object. Notice that it goes underneath my player. Position for this empty game object is 0, 0, 0, right? I'm going to tag it with a little green tag for now, or a little red tag. There it is. And what I want to do is I want to move this thing. I want to call this thing spawn point, or bullet spawn. We'll call it bullet spawn. And we'll move this thing so that it is in front of the player object right here. Now, it's really hard to see this thing because it's invisible, right? But if I kind of frame select it, you can see that it's a little point right here inside my screen. And maybe we can do, what we can do is we can make it so that it creates an icon for us so we can see it. All right, so I want to make it kind of appear here right in front of my player, right? So here's my bullet spawn. I want to move this around, and I want to kind of put it right in front of my player, like right here. And that's where the bullet is going to magically appear, right here. Okay. So that's the position, 26.9. Doesn't matter where it is. It's just going to be the bullet spawn position. Again, the player, let's put a tag on the player as well, make them all green, right? So we can see the player as well, right? From the game perspective, oh yeah, this is Unity at its best. There we go. from the game perspective, so as I move out here, you can see that I've got my, I'm looking at my event system. I'm looking at my bullet spawn right now. Let's see why it's not showing that stuff. Maybe because I turned it off. By the way, from a, you can see where I can add different parts of my screen. I can add shading and wireframes. I can put everything into wireframe. I can go do a shaded wireframe where I see the wireframes as well, right? You can look also at gizmos, and you can see that my selection wire, I can turn that off and on. There's a bunch of other gizmos that you can turn off and on here, right? My audio sources, my box collider 2D, I can turn those on so you can see those things, right? My camera, my capsule colliders, if I want to see those things. And this will all be available or viewable within our screen. Our polygon colliders, right? All these different things here that you can turn off and on. These are the icons that you can turn on, right? And I can turn on icons for a bunch of these things. Like, for example, if I want to see different things. All right, so that's part of what I can do. And scene lighting, I don't need. Oh yeah, this also turns off, toggles the audio on and off. So let's put that audio stuff back. I forgot about that. So I'm going to put the audio back to my game controller. So I'm going to turn this back on, but I'm just going to toggle the audio so that it's on or off, right? You can toggle it on and off here. And same thing in the game mode, right? I can maximize on play. I can mute the audio in my game mode, right? And I can also look at different gizmos. I can turn them on and off as well in my game, right? So I can see this from a troubleshooting perspective. It also often helps to see that stuff. All right, cool. So I know my bullet spawn is part of my player, and now I've got to program my player so when I click onto it, it does something. I can click anywhere on the screen. My left click is what's going to fire my bullet off, right? Now you're going to see I'm going to have a problem, and I want you to help me here. So let's think of what my problem can possibly be. Here's my player controller. And my player controller right now, I have the ability for me to move my mouse. My mouse X moves my plane around, right? That's what's happening on update. And you know what? It's about time that I fix this problem, right? I have an on collision enter 2D. That's pretty cool, right? I also have a this stuff here in my update. Now, if you've heard from what I said before, my update function should do one thing, and this is doing a bunch of things. It's calculating my mouse X position and moving my mouse around. I'm thinking now from an optimization perspective, first optimization we're going to do is make a movement, or some kind of move, plane move or something like that, or player move method that I'm going to call. So above my, it doesn't matter where I put it, but above, I'm going to put it above my update. I'm going to make a private underscore or void underscore player move method that I'm going to put all this stuff. I'm going to open this up here. I'm going to grab all this. I'm going to kind of cut it out and put it up here. So I'm going to modify this script here. And then I'm going to call my player move. So this dot underscore player move so that I can call my player move. The only thing I'm doing in my update is calling player move right now, right? I've done this because I want to make room for player fire, right? Because right now my input, the only thing I'm worried about, my input.mouse position.x is going to do that. But I want to do something called player fire. We go void, private void. I'll say player fire. You can also call it player shoot, whatever you want. If you use fire in the military, they'll say, no, that's not right. You should say shoot, right? Fire means something else. And what I want to do is get input, right? Now remember that I need to get input and check if my mouse is pressed down, right? So the way it works is if I say if input dot, and I get, if I type in mouse, you can see that if I start typing the first buttons of mouse, it says get mouse button. There's get mouse button up, get mouse button down, right? Those are the two things that I see. So when I press my mouse button itself, it does something. If I press down on the button, right, that's when I want the player to shoot, right? So notice it says get mouse button down, and then I have my button. Returns true during the frame the user pressed the given mouse button, whatever that mouse button is. And notice that it's listening for some kind of mouse button itself, right? Now, to really get a good handle on this, you can go to Unity scripting. So if I say Unity, right, mouse button, right, I'm gonna have some really cool scripting API that you're gonna see really quickly. That's why I love Unity so much, right? Notice that it says mouse button and it has 0 in here, right? 0, 1, 2, and so on. Yeah, I could definitely do this. 0 would be the left mouse button, 1 would be the right mouse button, and 2 would be the middle mouse button, right? But wouldn't it be nice if we had some kind of enumerations for this? And we do, right? So if I go back to Unity mouse button enums, right? So we have some key codes that are here. There's backspace, space, keypad 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And there's also left arrows, up, down, whatever. The F keys, the alpha keys, you know, for on the alphanumeric keyboard, hash, left parameters, all this kind of stuff. We're looking for mouse, right control, right shift. And here we go. Mouse 0 is the left or primary mouse button. So that is an enumeration for this. So mouse 0. So key code.mouse 0 is what I can put in there, right? And so I can do input.getKey, key code.mouse 0, and that's if the left mouse button is pressed. So there's two ways of doing this thing, right? So again, I'm going to say mouse, get mouse down. I'll say key code, mouse 0 to know which ones that is. Right, the left mouse button. Right, could have put 0 in there too. If that's pressed, then let's test it first before we fire. I want to say debug.log left mouse button pressed. Okay, so that's what's going to happen. Let's try it out and run it in Unity, right? We're going to call player fire here to the under player fire, right? So we're going to check for player movement and player firing right now, okay? And we're going to go into Unity to check that out. So I'm going to press play. If we did everything, oh, we have fixed errors. It says that the best overloaded method match for Unity engine does not match key button down. Oh yeah, sorry. So it doesn't like this. It wants. I thought there was a better way of doing it, and I think there is. I think it's in quotations, but I'm gonna leave it alone to key 0. Does that take that away? It does. Let's try that now. And if I press the left mouse button a bunch of times, you can see that I pressed it, right? Here's my console. I pressed it a bunch of times, and it engaged, right? Every time the mouse button is pressed. All right, so we know this works, and I want to instantiate my object at the spawn point, but I have no clue where the spawn point is, right? So I have to create a reference to the spawn point in my player. So I'm going to go up here, and where it says public left boundary and right boundary, and my height and it's colliding and all this kind of stuff, these public fields, right, or private fields, I'm going to make it so that this, by the way, is not private anymore. It's public because it's a game object. I'm going to make it so that I also have this public integer, right? It's going to be a transform, right? Because I only care about the position of my bullet spawn, right? And what I want to do is down here, is when I click the mouse button, I want to say that I want to instantiate, right, my bullet. Uh-oh. I don't know. I don't have a reference to my bullet either. So I got to get that done. So I'm going to go up here. Here's my bullet spawn. Well, I also need I need a game object, so public game object, which is going to be the bullet. Need that too, right? So down in here, my instantiate, I'm going to say instantiate my bullet, right? And I can put this dot bullet. Here's my bullet. And where do I want to instantiate it? The position? Well, it's not going to be the parent. It's going to be the bullet spawn is where it's going to be. That's what it needs, right? Let's make it so it's going to make a bullet at the bullet spawn every time I click the button. But we're going to see if this is a problem in a second. First of all, now that we've done that, we have to go back to our player object, and you can see that, I'm just going to minimize the stuff we don't need. You can see that we have a couple of additional things here. We have to pull in the bullet from our prefabs folder. So I'm going to go to my prefabs folder, grab the bullet, and drag and drop it in here. So here's a reference to our bullet prefab. And bullet spawn, well, that's part of the player. So I'm going to drag and drop that one in here too. So I need to know about the player, where it is, where it's spawning, and the bullet that I'm spawning. Okay. Now if I run the game, I should be able to fire bullets by pressing the buttons like this. See? Let's try that again. Let's run the game, and I can see that I can fire bullets, but I can fire a bunch of them, and they look kind of weird. Why is that? Let me take a look at this. Watch. I fire bullets, but if I move, the bullets kind of fire along with me. Why is that? They're kind of almost like tied to the object, right? I don't want to make the bullets a child of the object, right? That doesn't make any sense, right? I don't want to make a bullets, children of my spawn point. That's not what I want. I want them to be independent. Because right now what I'm telling it saying is, hey, go to that spawn, and that's the location of the parent object, right? What else can I do here in my mono develop? Remember, when I instantiate, I've just made my bullet spawn, right? So what other things? I have 10 different methods that are overloaded. So one is the parent, the transform of the parent. And let's see if I can move this. 2 is the original object. That's 1, just the original game object. I can go to the parent. A vector3 position instead, right? So instead of making it the parent, like I did there, the transform, I could change it to the position. I could also change, if I had a rotation, I can put it the rotation, and there, notice it's a quaternion, right? It's a type of rotation. It's not an Euler rotation, right? But a quaternion. I don't need that right now. But you can see that I could put, instead of a transform parent, because I could attach it to a parent object, right? I could instantiate the position instead. So I could do something like this. So bullet spawn is the transform dot position would only make it at the position where I spawned it, not following me around. Okay, let's see if that works. So go back, let's play. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. It says that cannot convert vector3 expression to type unity.transform, right? So unity transform has some invalid arguments, right? So it looks for this, but the reason why it doesn't like this is because if I'm going to use this, the argument is some kind of quaternion, right? Which I can just use quaternion.identity, which means like I'm not really doing anything. I'm not rotating it at all. I need to put this in there as well in order for my bullet to work. And now that should take away some of my issues. All right, let's see if that works. I'm just gonna ignore that error. So there, now I can move around and I can kind of do one of these, right? I can move my bullet. I can fire my bullets here. But one thing I can't do, if you notice, is I can't do a stream of bullets. I can't like hold my mouse button down, right? It's only when my mouse button clicks down and just how fast I can click that I can do my bullets. And I'm not sure, you were saying that you don't like how the speed is, right? Wasn't that what you were saying? You're saying, I don't like the speed of the bullet, right? It's too slow. Too slow? Okay, here's all the reference errors. It says null reference object. Reference cannot set instance of an object. It says player controller on collision exit to D. On collision exit to D. The other is colliding is false. Now, why am I getting this collision detection problem? Can anyone understand why I'm getting this collision detection problem, guys? It says, well, if my other collision game object get component custom controller, then yeah, okay, other is colliding is false. But hey, I'm colliding with something else. My controller, my player is actually colliding with its own bullet, right? Because I'm saying that the other, which is this collision.gameObject.get component, does not exist, right? Well, of course it wouldn't. And the reason why this is happening is because my bullet is colliding with the object itself. Why is this? Because of the way I positioned it. So this is what happens sometimes. So if I go back to my scene, and if I put let's bring back my bullet spawn, you can see that it's really super close to my player, and my bullet is going to be like this big. So if I pull my bullet spawn a little further out, like this, my bullet's going to be about this big. And if you look at the bullet itself, just to go to my prefabs for a second to see the bullet, my bullet has a vertical speed, right? But my radius is 4.5. Okay, what do I mean by that? So let's pull my bullet into the scene for a second. That's my bullet, and here's my spawning position, right? Now, what if I look at my player just for a second? If I go back to my player and I want to see my capsule collider, this is neat because, like, again, these are troubleshooting, right? That you need to know. That's my capsule collider. Well, before my bullet was here. That's where my spawn point is. So this is definitely a better spawn point. My collider here does not collide with my bullet. That's important. Where's my bullet spawn? There it is. So I can possibly bring it a little closer. I'm going to just use my bullet spawn as a, right? So there's my bullet. I'm going to pull this down so you can see it. So now, see this? This is where my bullet spawn is. Okay, well, where's my player collider? Look, that's pretty darn close, right? And that's what I had before. I was like really too close, right? So I don't want this, and that's not exactly perfect here. It's probably a little bit up from here, but where my bullet spawn is kind of in the middle. But I don't want that to happen. I can pull my bullet spawn a little bit more. It's not going to hurt me. No one's going to notice where my bullet comes out of, right? It's going to be too close anyway. So now my bullet's going to be approximately there. That's where my bullet's going to come up. So not exactly on the ship itself, right? Because it has its own collider. Okay, so I get rid of the bullet now. I was just using it as to kind of see where my bullet is, my bullet spawn location is. And there's my little dot for my bullet spawn. By the way, if it's too small, if my bullet spawn is too small, you can always make it so that it's much bigger. I can use another graphic for it, one of those, right? Now it's really small and it's hard to see. And that's why it fades away, right? And normally you'd be able to see all these things, but because I've changed my scale, so it's massive, right? My gizmo is really small. That's why you can't see it. But when I zoom in, you can see that my bullet spawn location is right here, okay? Okay, cool. Let's see if that works better. So I'm gonna run it. And when I press my button, you can see now that I'm not getting these weird errors, right? There's my bullet firing away, right? Again, that's pretty slow firing, and there's no bullet pattern, but it stops when I'm done. Also, take a look at my bullets themselves, okay? So here, let's see if I can last a little longer. I'm gonna bring this down a little bit more. I have one life left. I'll try not to die. So my bullets appear, and then my bullets disappear. My bullets appear, and my bullets disappear. When my bullets appear, right, what's really happening is I'm instantiating bullets. I'm creating new objects out of thin air kind of thing, right? And that's okay for our little game. But what if I have thousands of bullets? right? What if I have some kind of crazy amount of bullets? What about bullets from my enemies? You know, this is my bullet, right? Bullet from the player, right? But what about enemy bullet, right? I haven't made that. So that's a real problem. We got to think about how to deal with this later. Okay, so bullets work. It's a great place to stop and put it up on GitHub, right? So I'm going to say file, save scene. I made some changes too, file, save project, and I made some other changes other than just bullets. And I'm going to close down Unity, and I'm going to put it up on GitHub again. So I'm going to go back to Unity here, right? So let's go back up to folders, Unity projects, 305, and then F2017. And then when I'm in there, here's my new stuff. I'll say git add dots, git commit -m, and I'll say added bullet firing. Clear, git push origin master. Now, I haven't tested it on in a build yet. I'll do that after, just to save time. I know it's going to work. Bullet firing 101. How to do it, right? This is the basic level. It's not optimized. Remember, we talked about optimizations later. We're just firing bullets right now, okay? And pretty simple too. Like not much to do there, right? Create a bullet, has some speed. When it's instantiated, it goes. That's it, right? When I click my left mouse button, it just goes as many times as I click. If you want to make it so that when you hold your left mouse button, it clicks, then this is the wrong command. I'm using mouse button down. If I want mouse button to fire, and by the way, let's bring back Unity for a second. I was hoping there was going to be a really interesting enumeration, but there's not. There is another way to indicate the fire button. Right now, it's my bullet fire, right? Because my mouse button is being pressed. This is mouse and keyboard, right? My game is mouse and keyboard. Eventually, what I want to do is I want to bring in my controller, and I want to make it so that my game controller controls my mouse movements or my plane movements and all that stuff, right? Well, under my project, so if I go to edit, and if I go to project settings, I have something called input. Here's input. And when I click on input, I have these axes, right? Notice that I have other things I could do. I've used my mouse. Here's my mouse X and mouse Y, right? And I also have this fire axis called fire 1. So I'm specifying bullets, right? Because my mouse down is what I'm using, right? But I could also make it so that it's not just the mouse. So this is key or mouse button, right? Key or mouse button. But fire 1 is the name of my axis. So I could use a different way of firing my bullets. Let me show you that. So here's all my different axes that are named, right? There's 18 different axes by default, right? And if I was going to use my own game controller, I can just align these axes with my game controller. Okay, let's check this out. So going back into Unity, into my code, in my player controller, in my fire, instead of input.get mouse button down, right? I could do input.get axis. And I can put in the name of my axis, which was fire 1, if I'm not wrong, right? The fire 1 actually works both on my control key and my mouse button. Now this is different. And I want to show you both ways just so that you're clear. I think I'm missing a little. Yeah. And let's see how this works when I go back to Unity. So more player errors. What do I do? Input.get axis. What did I do wrong? Oh yeah. If input.get axis fire, right? I have to compare it to something, right? I want to make it so it's greater than 0, right? Because axes have they have a value. You get a value for the axis, right? So if it's greater than 0, right? So if I go back now, it should take away that error. Let me see. Yeah. Now look what happens. Woo! Right? I can spray and pray, right? Spray and pray that it just kills things, right? This is something maybe you don't want, right? I definitely don't want. This is way too crazy, right? Because I can hold my mouse button or my control key, by the way, and it'll do the same thing. I can move my control key and just spray as much as I want, right? Different firing patterns, right? Now, it kind of is okay. There's different ways of doing that. If you want to make a laser, so it looks like a laser, but it's not really a laser, and you make the bullet invisible in the background, right? But the laser line is showing. That's pretty cool, right? So you can spray something with a laser, but it's not really spraying bullets, right? The bullets are all invisible in the background, okay? But I don't want this. That's not the effect. So what I could do in this particular case is I could say that, well, okay, fine. If I fire my bullet, it's true, it's good, but I don't want it so that I have a limit to how much I can fire, right? And I almost want to create a delay, right? So some kind of delay. So let's create a delay of firing of 10 frames. So every 10 frames, I'm able to fire a bullet. Not crazy like I just did, right? So make it something like that. I'll make a private field called fire delay, or yeah, we'll call it fire delay. Fire delay, right? And we'll assign it a value. It's going to be an integer value. We're going to make it, right? So we'll make it like this. We'll kind of set it up here, right? So we'll say that the fire delay, this dot underscore fire delay, is equal to 10 frames for now, right? 10 frames. So every 10 frames, it's going to be allowed to fire. Okay, but oh man, how do I know how many frames have passed? Well, what I want to do is I want to see that, how many frames have passed since the start of my game, right? I'm going to count frames this way. Now, again, this is one way of doing it. There's many, many ways of doing it, right? But I almost want to say how much time has passed. So I'm going to kind of say, well, let's create a floating point number. Here's a floating point number that I'm going to call time. Okay? So this is like my game time or whatever you want to call it. Actually, let's just call it game time so you know what it is. Game time. And my game time is going to keep track of how much time has passed, right? Now, I don't want to do this here in my fire. I want to do it in my update because I think update's more reasonable, right? So I'm going to say something like this. This dot underscore game time plus equals to, right? Plus equals to time dot delta time. So time dot delta time is the amount of time that's passed. The time in seconds it took to complete the last frame. So for example, my frame would last a certain amount of time. Let's say, for example, 0.02 seconds, right? 0.02 seconds. So what I want is that this time dot delta time, remember what I'm asking it to do. I'm saying my fire delay is 10, right? So how long will it take for me to get to 10, to count to 10 with that? And it doesn't make any sense, right? So it's got to be kind of a number that makes sense, like 0.1, right? So when it gets to 0.1, if it's increments of 0.1, if the frame is there, then I can, when I'm holding down my button, it's only going to fire in increments of 0.1, okay? So this number is wrong, and it can't be an integer. It has to be a float for my fire delay, right? And we'll make it so that the fire delay is 0.10f, right? So that's the fire delay. So 0.10, of a second, right? That's what it is. All right, so that's my time. So my time.delta time. And just to show you this, before we implement it, we'll do a debug.log and of this dot underscore game time. I want to see what the game time is. Right, this is from the very beginning of my game. So when I play my game, this is going to spiral up forever, right? Which is also something we want to be careful of, because if it goes too high, right, What is game time, by the way? Game time is a floating point number that's going to continue to rise, to grow, right? Forever and ever and ever. All right, so if I run this thing, right, then I should get a value. I'm going to stop it in a second. There you go. You can see that my value is 1.15, 1.17, 1.18, 1.20. Well, there we go. 1.23, 1.27, 1.28. You can see that it's increasing pretty good over the whole time, all right? But it's not increasing in a way that I can check how many frames have passed, right? Here's 0.002, 0.004, 0.03, 0.037. Those are all the frames. But I want to count these things every time time.delta time happens, right? I want to multiply it by something. That might be the easier way to do it. I want to kind of make it to time.delta time is my beat. I'm just beating, beat, like a beat of a drum, each frame, right? Because it's much easier than dividing by 10 or something like that. I got to think about this for a second, right? So it's almost like when time.delta time increases, right? When it increases, then I want to add 1 to it, right? So think about that, 0.02, right? 0.02. What do I got to multiply 0.02 to get 1? Like 1.0. How do I multiply 0.02 to get 1.0? How do I do that? And is there another function I can use? So there's time.delta time, and there's also time.time. So time.time. And time.time, if I hover over it, it says the time at the beginning of this frame. Read only. This is the time in seconds since the start of the game. Okay, let's see what that gives us. Time in seconds. And I'll play again, and I'll stop immediately. Time in seconds. Okay, now what do I get? 0.02, 0.03, 1, right? So that's kind of beats too. So there's different kinds of times we can ask for. Time.time and time.delta time. Right? There's also fixed delta time, max delta time. There's all kinds of other stuff that's here as well. I like time.delta time because that gives me kind of my call it, we're calling it game time, whatever. We can also call it that it's frames, how many frames that are passing, right? And it's almost like every time time.delta time improves, I want to increase my stuff. Well, if that's the case, if all I care about is counting frames, then really what I can do is just make game time an integer again and plus plus. Every time my update triggers, I'm just incrementing my time, right? Because that's what I really want. Okay, so let's go back up. So we'll make this back into an int. We'll make this into an int. We don't have to use delta time. I'm just talking about it so you understand what it is, right? So delta time will not be this anymore. It'll be game time plus plus. Right? So every time it goes through, it's going to increase the game time by 1 second or 1 frame, right? And what I want to say is, hey, don't fire the bullet, even though I click the button, unless my game time, if my this._game time, right, percent, what happened there? If this._game time %10, right, is equal to 0, then instantiate. What does that mean? So I'm just going to put this in there. I'll put it in brackets so you guys can see this as an operation, right? So what does percent mean? It's modulus, right? Modulus means that I'm dividing by 10, right? So every 10 frames, if I divide by 10, right, then I'm for sure going to get some kind of, it can't be, I want to look for a 0 remainder. So if I divide by 10, it's going to be an even number of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 frames, 60, 100, and so on. This thing is going to be divided by 0. Sorry, divided by 10 is equal to 0. So I get a 0 remainder when I divide by 10. So that means every 10 frames. And if I try it out, I got a couple errors. Let's see what the errors are. It says that, yeah, I can't have my fire delay. That's my fire delay. And my fire delay, what I wanted to do was with this fire delay thing is I want to specify a number here where I could eventually tell it what it is. So I'm going to make this back to 10. And so that way, this makes more sense. If this dot game percent fire delay, this dot fire delay, right? So whatever my game time is divided by fire delay, if that's equal to 0, then fire. That means it's more of a you know, something that's more understandable than 10. What does 10 mean? Right? So what I'm really doing here is wait 10 frames to fire. That's what this is doing. 10 frames. 10 frames to fire. And let's try this again. So I'm going to clear this and press play. And now when I click on the button, right, it doesn't fire so fast. Still fires pretty quickly, but not as fast as before. And if 10 frames isn't any good, right, if you think this is too slow, right, you can make it so that it fires every 5 frames. That's why I made it a fire delay as opposed to a number, right? So I can go back up here and say fire delay is whatever it's going to be, right? So let's make it 5. Maybe that's going to work better. Again, I could expose it in the inspector as well, but I don't want to expose this particular one. So here's 5. So that's pretty cool. If I want to make this a pretty good fire delay, it's not firing every frame, but it's still pretty quick. I still think that's too fast for me. I think 10 was a better number. But it depends on the kind of weapon. You might be able to get your ship a power up. You can fire super fast with less delay, or some kind of weird spray pattern, right? Laser, right? So that solves my bullet spraying pattern, and that also makes it so that if I use my Xbox controller in the future, I can use my A button to fire, right? That's my fire 1, okay? Or I can use another trigger, whatever the trigger is going to be on my controller that I can set. Because right now I can set my axes, horizontal, vertical, right? Horizontal and vertical axis, fire 1, fire 2, fire 3. You can see that those are there, right? As well as my jump button, whatever that is. My mouse X and mouse Y are positions. Mouse scroll wheel is something else. Horizontal and vertical. Notice that there is other horizontal and vertical axes here, right? As well as another fire 1, fire 2, and jump, and so on, right? So I can have this as my controller. I can add other, there's other ways of adding other controllers in here. Right now, this is the default. Okay, so let's go back to the inspector, right? So this is the inspector. And I've got this firing is happening pretty good now, but I need an enemy. Okay, and this is what I want to kind of capture here, right? So I did bullet firing. You know what? It's 11:44. Maybe I'll break this down to another video. So you have to watch the whole thing, right? And I'll make the enemy next.